We think of Israel and Iran as eternal enemies. But what if they were once mirrors of the same soul, because hidden beneath thousands of years of conquest, scripture, and silence lies a forgotten bond older than borders, deeper than war? A sun rises over two lands, one to the east, wrapped in desert flame and sacred fire, the other to the west, where the stone breathes with ancient psalms. We are taught to see them as divided, as if their stories never crossed, their spirits never touched. And yet, if we listen closely, not to the politics, but to the echoes, we may hear something else, a resonance, an ancient thread running beneath the surface of history, woven in forgotten temples, carved into tablets broken by time, preserved in the syllables of mystics whose names were almost erased. Iran and Israel, Persia and Zion stand today as symbols of enmity. But there was a time, long before borders, when these names did not yet exist. Only energies, only truths, only songs sung in firelight about the origins of the soul, the structure of heaven, and the path back to source. What if the conflict we see today is not the story, but the forgetting of a story? Let us journey, then not to choose sides, but to seek roots. Let us walk backward through time, through veils of empire and smoke of war, into the sacred silence that existed before the names. Let us begin before the names were even spoken. Before Israel was a kingdom, before Iran was an empire, there was only the land and the stars, and the voice of something higher, something whispering through fire and wind, waiting for someone to listen. Long before the word Jew was spoken, before Persian meant anything to the tongue, there were tribes, nomads, stargazers, children of the earth, asking the same questions beneath different skies. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What waits beyond death? In the mountainous heart of what would become Iran, seers and sages gathered around sacred flames. These fires were not symbolic, they were living, eternal, guarded night and day, not just for warmth, but because they were seen as portals, mouths of the divine. And in the hilltops of Canaan, shepherds gazed into the darkness and saw angels descend in dreams, visions of ladders to heaven, whispers of a covenant that could bind heaven and earth. Different stories, different soil, but the same hunger. These were civilizations born of contemplation, civilizations not of machines or markets, but of meaning. And though they would one day raise temples, forge empires, and wage wars, in the beginning, they were both listening to the wind, to the stars, to the silence between heartbeats. Archaeologists speak of shared motifs between these regions' winged symbols, serpents with crowns, trees with 7 branches. Historians note that the roots of monotheism may have bloomed from Zoroaster's fire worship as much as from Moses' mountain. But this is not about facts. This is about feel. The feeling that two souls, distant in space, once knew the same language of spirit and then forgot it. There is an ancient Akkadian inscription found near the Tigris River, dated nearly 4,000 years ago. It speaks of the twin pillars that hold up the world, one of justice, one of light. Scholars argue whether these were symbolic or geographic. But what if they were both? What if one pillar stood in the lands of Persia and the other in the land of the Hebrews? What if these were not just nations, but guardians of something deeper? A mirror held across the sand. But as we know, mirrors can crack, and memory can fade. And so nations were named, borders drawn, stories rewritten. But the soil still remembers. The rocks, the mountains, the stars above both lands, they do not forget. They whisper to anyone still listening, "You were one, once." In the great silence that follows origin, it is not warriors who speak first, but mystics. Before kings carved their names in stone, it was the sages who kept the memory of the cosmos alive. And in the ancient lands that would become Iran and Israel, these mystics were more than men. They were conduits, living questions, flames carrying the breath of God. Let us begin in Persia. There, in the cradle of mountains and desert, walked the Magi, priestly guardians of a fire that never died. They were not sorcerers, as later tongues would call them, but observers of stars, keepers of cycles, servants of the unseen order. To the Magi, the world was a layered dream, and each flame was a doorway. Their sacred texts, the Avesta, spoke of Asha, divine truth, cosmic law, the vibration of alignment, not unlike what we might call Dharma, or perhaps Logos. They believed the world was a battleground, not between nations, but between truth and falsehood, between the clarity of light and the shadow of confusion. To live rightly was to vibrate in harmony with the eternal flame. To betray this was to sink into dissonance, darkness, dis-ease. Now look westward across the plains, into the highlands of Canaan and beyond. There, the Hebrew prophets did not speak of fire, they became fire. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Elijah, their visions came like lightning, tearing open the veil between heaven and earth. But behind their thunderous proclamations lay a hidden current, one that flowed not through commandments, but through mystical knowing. Among these currents emerged a group known as the Merkava mystics seekers, who studied the chariot of God not as metaphor, but as a real ascent of the soul. They mapped out heavens, not in geography, but in consciousness. They believed the soul could rise through layers of being past the angels, past the spheres, back to the throne of unity. Do you see the mirror yet? In Persia, the soul sought Asha, harmony. In Israel, the soul sought tikkun, repair. Both spoke of ascent. Both revered flame. Both taught that the physical world was not ultimate, but a reflection, a training ground, a veil. And both knew something dangerous, that if humanity remembered its origin, if we realized that heaven was not a place but a frequency, then no empire could rule us. Perhaps this is why so much of their knowledge was hidden, burned, erased, or rebranded. You may have heard of the Magi in a Christmas song, "We Three Kings of Orient Are," but have you asked why they came to see a child from Judea? Why Persian priest astrologers would bow to an infant born under a specific star? What if they recognized him not as a foreign messiah, but as the fulfillment of a shared prophecy? A resonance foretold in their own fire temples. And what of the Zohar, the great mystical text of Kabbalah? It speaks of sparks of divine light trapped in matter, sparks that must be raised, reassembled. Persian mystics spoke of the same Fravashi, the soul's higher self, watching over it from a plane of light, and of the Chinvat bridge, the passage between realms, tested not by dogma, but by vibration of heart. The mystics knew truth does not belong to a tribe. It descends like dew upon those who prepare their spirit to receive. But what happens when mystics die and kings take their place? When the inner flame is replaced by outer rule? When secret teachings are weaponized, inverted, or simply forgotten? Then the mirror cracks, and what was once unity becomes duality. Us versus them, east versus west. And yet, even in war, there are those who remember. The fire never truly goes out. You listening now may feel its warmth. not in your hands, but in your chest. A flicker, a memory, that once the Magi and the mystics sat by the same flame and understood the same silence. Before language divided, there were symbols. Before scripture, there was shape. And long before the names Iran and Israel were etched into politics, there were marks in the stone universal, unspoken and alive. Symbols are not inventions. They are revelations. They emerge not from the mind, but from the deep substratum of being dreamt by the cosmos, remembered by the soul. And between these two ancient civilizations, we find symbols that are not only parallel, they are echoes. Take, for example, the winged disc seen in both Zoroastrian and Mesopotamian art. In Persia, it represented Ahura Mazda, the supreme force of light and wisdom. A winged presence hovering above kings, holding a ring symbol of divine authority and eternal truth. Now cross westward, and you will find the chariot vision of Ezekiel, 4 living creatures, wheels within wheels, wings stretching skyward, not mere angels, but vehicles of divine movement, a portable throne for the boundless presence of God. What if the winged disc and the chariot were variations of the same revelation, the unseen made seen through sacred geometry? Or the tree of life not just a metaphor, but a map? In Kabbalistic tradition, the tree of life is composed of 10 sephirot emanations of the divine, flowing from unity into form. Each branch, each path, is an instruction for the soul to descend, experience, and return. But long before the Zohar codified these paths, Persian gardens were planted in exact geometries, always 4 rivers, flowing from a central spring. A living diagram of paradise, of cosmic harmony, echoing the Garden of Eden, or perhaps shaping it. In the Avesta, the original paradise was called Vahishta, the best existence. It was not just a place, it was a pattern, a design of balance, beauty, and alignment. And that design shows up everywhere. In the menorah, the 7-branched lamp of the temple, and in the haft scene, the 7 sacred items laid out in Persian New Year rituals, both 7s, both liturgical, both pointing to something beyond number into rhythm. Consider also the lion in Israel, the lion of Judah, fierce protector and royal archetype. In Persia, the lion and sun, a symbol of sovereignty, cosmic kingship, and harmony of opposites. Why does this lion reappear? Perhaps because it is not just an animal. It is an archetype, the solar force of divine will, breaking illusion, defending truth. And then there is the serpent. Feared, yes, but also revered. In mystical Judaism, the serpent is not only temptation, it is awakening. Moses lifts the bronze serpent on a pole, not to curse, but to heal. And in Persian myth, the serpent king Zahak is both tyrant and symbol of inner corruption, the ego unchecked. In both worlds, the serpent is a paradox, a symbol of descent and ascent, fall and return. Even the very letters, the shapes of the sacred alphabets, carry echoes. The Hebrew aleph, silent, infinite, pregnant with possibility. The Avestan Asha order, truth, light. Same breath, same silence. Why do these patterns cross borders, beliefs, and bloodlines? Because truth is not owned, it emerges like light through stained glass. It refracts through culture, but the source remains the same. And so we must ask, did these civilizations share a lineage? Did priests or sages travel the Silk Road of spirit long before trade routes were mapped? Or was the same divine intelligence speaking to them both, dressed in different myths, shaped by different soils, but carrying the same essence? Because symbols are not accidents, they are memory devices, keys for awakening. And when the same symbols appear across lands called enemies, we must wonder, what have we forgotten? What lies beneath the surface of flags, dogmas, and politics? What sacred language still pulses beneath the sand? History, as we are taught it, is a sequence of battles and kings, dates memorized, borders redrawn. But beneath that linear tale lies another rhythm, a hidden choreography between souls and symbols, between empires that, though appearing opposed, once danced in shadowed symmetry. Let us step back to the 6th century BCE, a moment that should have fractured history, but instead healed it. The Babylonian Empire had conquered Jerusalem. The temple lay in ruins. The Israelites exiled, scattered, broken. And then a Persian king rises, not a fellow Hebrew, not a prophet of Warchanjabiuch, but Cyrus the Great, son of the East, flame of Zoroaster. And what does he do? He frees the Jews, restores their right to worship, funds the rebuilding of their temple, declares, in one of the earliest human rights decrees ever recorded, "The God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem." This is not fiction. It is engraved in the Cyrus cylinder, buried in the earth and later unearthed like a stone gospel. And in the Bible itself, the book of Ezra, the book of Isaiah, Cyrus is called God's anointed, the only non-Jew to ever receive that title. Why? Because in that moment, empire and spirit aligned, Persia and Zion, though different in faith, saw in one another a shared flame. But as with all sacred alignments, the ark was not preserved. Empires grew, egos hardened, mystics faded, and bureaucrats took their place. What began as resonance turned into rivalry. And slowly, from shadowy corridors of power, ancient cooperation dissolved into controlled opposition. Alexander came, Rome followed, and as Christianity rose and Islam surged forth from Arabia, both lands transformed again. Persia became Iran, land of the Aryans, embracing Shia Islam, a path of inner reflection and martyrdom. Israel disappeared, then returned reborn in the 20th century under Zionist vision, carved from memory and trauma. But while the names changed, the symbols never stopped whispering. Throughout medieval times, Kabbalists studied the stars like their Persian ancestors. Persian Sufis like Rumi wrote verses that mirrored the Psalms of David, songs of longing, of union, of divine intoxication. Even politically, there were flickers of remembered brotherhood. Medieval Jewish scholars thrived in Persian cities. Mystics traded manuscripts in secret, across borders. But history, as told by conquerors, does not dwell on these alignments. It highlights the schisms, the betrayals, the wars, and so we arrive at the modern age, where Iran and Israel are branded enemies, not just politically, but existentially. One is cast as the aggressor, the other the threat. One rises with missiles, the other with walls. But what if this division is not the truth, but the inversion of truth? What if we are watching a cosmic mirror break in real time, a sacred alliance, long forgotten, now projected as opposition so intense that it hints at something deeper? Because hatred that viscerally charged often masks a memory of intimacy. And when you see someone as a mirror, the fear is never really about them. It's about what they reflect. What if Iran and Israel, beneath their political facades, are not just adversaries, but twin keepers of an ancient flame? A flame that, if remembered, would burn away the illusion of separation. And so, they remain locked not in battle, but in amnesia. Two brothers, once aligned in mystery, now performing the tragedy of forgetting. They spoke in different tongues, walked different sands, draped in different robes, breathing in the smoke of different altars. But the words they carried, the visions that tore through their chests came, perhaps, from the same flame. The prophets of Israel and the seers of Persia. We remember the prophets of Israel with fire in their throats. Isaiah, who saw a world where swords would become plowshares. Jeremiah, who wept for the soul of a nation that had forgotten its covenant. Ezekiel, who beheld a chariot of divine wheels, eyes upon eyes, turning through dimensions beyond time. These were not men of politics. They were soul cartographers, mapping the inner structure of the cosmos through poetry and pain. And in the East, the Persian visionaries burned with equal fire. Most ancient among them Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, the one who heard the whisper of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, speaking from within the sacred flame. Zoroaster did not teach religion. He revealed a cosmic code, that the universe was structured between forces of Asha truth and Druj falsehood, that our every thought, word, and deed sent ripples through an unseen matrix of cause and consequence. That choice, the conscious alignment with light, was the true path of evolution. Compare this to Moses, standing before the burning bush, a flame that burned, but did not consume. A voice that spoke, not in domination, but in beckoning. Both flames, Hebrew and Persian, did not demand sacrifice. They demanded awakening. And from those awakenings came ethical systems. Yes, but deeper still, mystical blueprints for the soul. In the Jewish mystical tradition, the Sephirot represent the divine fractal descending from pure oneness to the fragmented world. And in Zoroastrian cosmology, the Amesha Spentus, the holy immortals, express aspects of the divine light that shape the realms of being. 10 in the West, 7 in the East, but both point to a universe structured by archetypal consciousness, where reality is not random, but intentional, vibrating with spiritual architecture. Even their eschatology, their visions of the end, mirror one another. The Zoroastrian Saoshyant, a messianic redeemer who will raise the dead, purify the world, and usher in a final resurrection. The Jewish Mashiach, who brings the world to peace, restores the temple, gathers the exiles. But perhaps these ends are not events, but states of being, moments when consciousness collectively remembers the source. And here lies the mystery. How could two civilizations, isolated by geography, era, and empire, dream such similar dreams? Did they borrow from one another? Possibly. History speaks of Babylonian exile, Persian liberation, cross-pollination of myths and memes. But there's a deeper possibility, one not taught in schools. That truth is not taught, it is received. That the prophets of Israel and the seers of Persia were plugged into the same current, tuned to the same frequency, each becoming a vessel for a wisdom older than words. And perhaps, over time, their followers forgot the flame and clung only to the forms. We memorized the prophets, but forgot to listen. We recited verses, but stopped seeing visions. And so the sacred thread, the one that connected nations through spirit, was severed, but not lost, because prophecy, true prophecy, never dies. It lingers, in the margins, in the dreams we don't talk about, in the shiver down your spine when you read an ancient line and feel that it was written for you. Perhaps the flame still speaks, and perhaps it is not asking for allegiance, but for remembrance. not whose God is true, but who still burns for truth. At first glance, it is war, a clash of nations, ideologies, and weaponry, missiles, speeches, sanctions, a conflict painted in the language of power and fear. But when you look deeper, beneath the headlines, beneath the flags, something older begins to stir. This is not merely political, it is mythic. Iran and Israel, two names that dominate modern tensions. But they are not just countries. They are symbols, living archetypes in the collective psyche of the world. Iran, ancient Persia, guardian of fire, land of esoteric wisdom, the mystic's east. Israel, the covenant nation, the keeper of the ark, the sacred west within the east. And like twin archetypes cast into opposition, they seem destined to face one another. But why? Why do these two, of all nations, hold such gravitational tension? It is as if they are two poles of a broken axis, once unified in silence, now reverberating in echoes of accusation. This war was never just war. It is the externalized drama of an inner fracture, a metaphysical schism between two aspects of the same soul. You see it in the symbols they bear: the lion, the flame, the prophecy, the mourning of the past, the hunger for the return. Both see themselves as chosen not in arrogance, but in burden. Iran holds the lineage of resistance through remembrance, the martyrdom of Hussein, the refusal to bow to false gods. Israel holds the lineage of resilience through covenant, the survival through exile, the return to the promised soil. But beneath both is the same wound displacement from source. And that displacement creates the perfect storm for projection. What we cannot face within, we battle without. And so the mystic truths once shared the knowledge of vibration, soul ascent, sacred geometry. The fire within are buried beneath rhetoric. The Magi are forgotten, the prophets reduced to footnotes. In their place, politicians, commanders, narratives wrapped in trauma, justified by pain. And yet, there are moments, tiny cracks in the illusion. A Jewish mystic reads Rumi in secret. A Persian scholar studies the Torah in quiet awe. A soul from either land dreams of a place where no flags fly, only stars. Because deep down, many feel it. This war is not necessary. It is karmic theater, a replay of a forgotten betrayal, a sacred test unpassed. What if the aggression is simply the shadow of suppressed kinship? What if every missile is a message from the subconscious, saying, I see you, and I hate you, because I remember you? What if, long ago, in a place outside of time, these two nations agreed to mirror one another, to hold up the light and the dark, until humanity learned to see both? And now, as the flames rise, as the world watches, we must ask, what if this war is the soul's last cry for reunion? Not of land, not of treaties, but of memory. Because the battlefield is not only in the desert, it is in us. And healing, true healing, will not come from dominance, but from recollection. The kind that pierces time, the kind that awakens the flame before it consumes us all. There is a bridge. You cannot see it with your eyes. No architect designed it. No army can guard it. Yet it has always been there, connecting souls before it ever connected soil. Between Iran and Israel, beneath rubble, rhetoric, and remembrance, lies something sacred, a forgotten bridge of spirit. Not a bridge of stone, but of story. You may not believe in prophecy. You may not believe in destiny. But believe this. When two ancient civilizations share the same flame, the severing of their bond sends shockwaves into time. This bridge once carried mystics across borders of language. It carried ideas not as politics, but as vibrations. It whispered to the wind in Aramaic and Old Persian, in prayers sung to fire, in psalms chanted beneath stars. It is not gone, only buried. Buried under modern fears, under weapons manufactured in forgetting, under histories written by the victors, the ones who profit when two brothers forget they are brothers. But something stirs. There are whispers in the sacred texts. In the book of Isaiah, a passage almost never quoted. In that day there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. The Assyrians will go to Egypt and the Egyptians to Assyria, and Israel will join them. It ends with this line, "Blessed be Egypt, my people, Assyria, my handiwork, and Israel, my inheritance." Assyria, Persia, the East. This is not political. This is cosmic architecture, a map written in metaphor, waiting to be reread with mystical eyes. And across the sands of Iran, in the Sufi verses of Hafez, we read, "I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Jew." These are not words of erasure, they are words of return. Return to the bridge, to the soul before its name, to the place where the flame never chose a side. So what does this mean for us in a world that seems irreversibly divided? It means the work of remembering belongs to you. It means that healing between nations begins as healing between opposites within. Can you hold both grief and grace? Can you see your enemy as a reflection? Can you walk the inner bridge between your own fire and your own silence? Because the collective only heals when the individual chooses remembrance. And so, we end where we began, not with missiles, not with empires, but with the soul. 2 lands, 2 names, 2 paths, but one flame, one truth, one bridge waiting, patient, beneath the ruins, not destroyed, only forgotten. And perhaps the veil was never closed. We simply forgot we were light.